We are back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast, and quickly before I get into the preview for the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, I just got the recent news that according to ESPN, former Steelers wide receiver Antoine Randall L., who spent really the majority of his coaching career with the Detroit Lions there and doing a very good job, as their wide receivers coach. He is now being hired by the Chicago Bears to become their assistant head coach and wide receivers coach. Another Lions assistant coach moving on to other opportunities, and now Antoine Randall L. will stay in the division, but much like Ben Johnson, who now he's going to be working with again, they're going over to Chicago. So maybe not the biggest news for everybody, but I think that's like super. One, it's super cool because Antoine Randall L. I thought has been doing a great job there, but another Lion leaves to join the Chicago Bears, which is kind of crazy, and it'll be even more interesting when they play each other again. So that's the mini breaking news that we had. But back to this, the main event, everything that we'd hope to see in an AFC Championship game, I think, is going down at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time this Sunday, right? This matchup between the Bills and the Chiefs is basically going to be a different sort of style of a Rocky versus Drago, the U.S. hockey team against the Soviet Union in the 1980s Winter Olympics, Cody Rhodes defeating Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, Peyton Manning trying to defeat Tom Brady. This matchup between the Chiefs and the Bills has sort of built up the same sort of feeling, underdog feeling that all these other scenarios that I just threw out have filled a bunch of people with. And if you've seen any of them, you see, the underdog story, the underdog, getting their victory finally and, reaching the mountaintop for at least this stage of the story and finally defeating, the king, dethroning the king eventually. And that's the sort of feeling I think the whole city of Buffalo and the Bills would get if they finally manage to defeat Patrick in Kansas City. Because the Bills and the Chiefs have met 7 times over the last 4 to 5 years. And while Buffalo has won a couple of regular season games, they've never beaten the Chiefs in the playoffs up until this point. They're 0-3 in the playoffs against the Chiefs. And what I thought was really mind-blowing, just to add more, I guess, pressure to this game, this stat was no quarterback has ever defeated another quarterback more than 3 times in the postseason. It's never happened in postseason history that one quarterback has beaten another one more than 3 times. And we're already at that limit with Josh and Patrick. Josh has already lost to Patrick 3 times. So on Sunday, we're going to either see some history be made by Patrick defeating him 4 times more than anybody else in postseason matchups, or Josh, like all the other guys in the past, is going to be able to finally get a win over, the other guy that's been very much the heavy favorite in this duel when they face off against each other. So I thought that stat was really interesting, and some more context and more of an idea of what this matchup I think means in terms of who wins and, obviously who ends up moving on to the Super Bowl. You look at first the star power all over the field on both sides of the ball. We're not going to be shy of any big names, any big name protagonists or anything like that. It feels like I'm talking about a movie or something like that, right? With this matchup, but we got all the stars you need for this game. 2 of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and potentially of this generation. One of them maybe being one of the best of all time. Just adds a lot more to it. Kansas City chasing history, trying to three-peat, and they're going to obviously need to win this game to make that a reality potentially. And on the other side, you got the Bills and Josh Allen trying to get back to a Super Bowl, right? The Bills are 0-4, losing 4 straight Super Bowls in their history, and they want to get back there. They want to have another opportunity of avenging all of those losses. The last time they won a Super Bowl was in 1993 when they lost to the Cowboys. And this would also be Josh Allen's first Super Bowl, right? And I mentioned it yesterday. This could be his first and hopefully not his only Super Bowl, right? Because when you're playing against Lamar, Burrow, Herbert, Mahomes, CJ Stroud, all these guys in the playoffs, right? It's no guarantee that you just make it back every other year or every, once in 3 years, right? For some people, unfortunately, this could be one of their only times or really the only time they make it. So you can't squander an opportunity like this, right? You're here in this matchup. You got to get over this hurdle that you've constantly fallen short of each and every time. So that's another thing to add to the stipulation, I guess, of this game. And in these matchups, we've seen really a lot that could happen in an NFL game, right? We've seen controversial calls against the Chiefs, right? Go figure. There was a game where Patrick, if you guys remember, and Andy Reid were very vocal about the refereeing decisions. Kind of ironic now based on what's being said about the Chiefs and how they're it looks like they're favored by the refs, but I don't really think that's the case. But it is ironic that one of these games has ended like this and against the Kansas City Chiefs. So we've seen controversial calls in these matchups. We've seen overtime games. We've seen game-winning or missed game-winning field goals. Coin tosses that have changed the landscape of overtime rules, right? There's been a lot of impactful things that have happened with these matchups, right? Josh, still trying to be in that group, right, with Patrick, right? Not just being known as the guy that always loses to him in the postseason. And Patrick, using these matchups to build his legacy. And not only off of these matchups, but go on and win Super Bowls and things like that. A lot is made and a lot of legacies are, set out there based on matchups like this, these legendary rivalries. And to be honest, it's not really a rivalry yet because the Bills really haven't won when it's mattered most. And on that, connecting to that point, the Chiefs and Patrick are 4-2 in conference games overall. The Bills are actually 0-4 on the road under Sean McDermott in the playoffs as well. And the Bills have also lost 7 straight AFC title games. Their last win was in 1992 when they made it to that Super Bowl, but ultimately lost as well. So you can see where the Bills' past history with getting to this point really isn't in their favor. But, it feels like this year is a little bit different. And with that comes the Bills this year that have a league best 24 turnover differential in their favor, right? They're plus 24 in turnover differential, plus 3 in the playoffs so far, while Kansas City was only a plus 6 in turnover differential in the regular season, but since they last played the Bills, they've been plus 11 in turnovers as well. So we've talked about it earlier this week, how the turnovers were, it seemed like the key factor in all of these matchups, right? Who turns it over less usually ends up winning. So I don't think this game's going to be any different. And you can see that the Bills have had that point in their favor the majority of the season and in the playoffs as well. So that's going to be a huge turning point as well. But that being said, now we can turn to the injuries. And there's no real big ones for the Chiefs other than Charles Omenihu and Jalen Watson, who weren't able to play in the first game because they were obviously injured. Now they've come back, and now they will get a chance to try and make an impact against the Bills, again, when it matters most. And for the Bills, they will unfortunately be without Taylor Rapp, their safety. He's already been ruled out with a hip injury that he suffered against the Baltimore Ravens, and he got an interception in that game, but he will not be able to recover quick enough to be able to play in this game. So that's really all the injury news because both these teams are pretty healthy in relation to like the Commanders and the Eagles, right? So that brings us now to the keys of the game, right? The keys, what each team needs to focus on. And for the Bills, I think to me is getting that ball out quickly, and really using all the weapons that you have to your advantage, right? There's no reason why Josh has to be Superman and has to hold the ball too long and just create these unnecessary superhuman plays, right? He's really gone away from that this year. So I think now, when it matters most, don't try and do anything, extraordinary, right? That's what everybody kind of builds it up to be, and that's kind of like what I did at the beginning of this segment. But really, the moment always seems bigger than it truly is, and I don't think the Bills should really go away from that and what they've been all year with being methodical, using Khalil Shakir, using guys like Curtis Samuel, Amari Cooper's obviously there, Dalton Kincaid, Ty Johnson. They got so many names that I didn't even mention James Cook either, that they could use to their advantage. So there's no reason why they should be holding on to the ball too long and taking, unnecessary actions in this game. Just continue to be who you are, run the ball, get the ball out quickly, and don't let their pass rush, affect this game, because Karlaftis is coming off of a huge game, and their entire defensive line just tormented the Texans in their last game. So if they're able to do that, I think they're going to have their best shot at defeating the Chiefs in this game. And then for the Chiefs, ironically, is off of that last point, you got to get to Josh. Yeah, you got to try and get to him as much as you can, because he has hardly been sacked this year. They didn't get to him in the regular season game, and they ended up losing that game. Not just because of that, but that's a huge, turning point in some of these games, right? You could get a strip sack, you could knock them out of field goal range, or you could just disrupt their offensive rhythm. And last time in Buffalo, the Bills were really in rhythm. They really had a good flow to them in that game, and they controlled the tempo and really managed the game perfectly. And the Chiefs got to disrupt that. They got to disrupt that and use the home crowd to their advantage, create some sort of miscommunications, and get after Josh and try and get him on the ground as much as possible. So with that, now we're going to get over to the matchups. And I'll start off with the offensive line against defensive line for both sides. The Bills won that matchup last time, and I just finished talking about it, how the Chiefs got to get on the board somehow, because last time the Bills sacked Patrick 2 times, and like I mentioned before, Josh didn't get touched or anywhere near touched last time at all, right? They never got to him, not even close. So they got to try and do that as much as possible this time, and who's able to do that and kind of disrupt the other's offense is going to have already a big advantage in this matchup. And then the Chiefs, not so secret weapon in Travis Kelce, right? Because you know what kind of player he is, how much of a legend he is. But even though in the regular season it might not look like the usual Travis Kelce, in the playoffs it's a completely different story. He affects the game, and he looks like he's like 8 years younger whenever he plays in the playoffs, right? It's insane. So him being matched up against Matt Milano, Christian Benford, or Taron Johnson, it's going to be a group effort to try and limit Travis Kelce's impact as much as possible. So I'm going to be very interested to see those matchups, because Mark Andrews, despite dropping the ball and fumbling, he hurt the Bills defense a good amount, right? He was getting heavily involved in that game. So Travis Kelce, you'd expect him to do the same thing, and we'll see if the Bills can have more success against Travis than they did against Mark Andrews. But the last matchup I have on here is the obvious one. Patrick against Josh, even though it's not a direct matchup. This game's going to come down to the quarterback play and who makes... It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but who makes the safer choices and essentially who doesn't lose this game. And that sounds weird because you don't have Patrick or you don't have Josh to not lose football games. You obviously have them to win football games, but people get too enamored with Patrick doing some crazy thing and winning the game, and same thing with Josh, right? Doing some crazy physical ability or just some crazy throw and, winning the game that way. But I think both of them have matured to a point where they just don't need to do that, and they found that the entire team is in their best form when everything's running like a well-oiled machine and they're just managing the game, not necessarily just taking over at any given time. And that maturity, that lack of turnover, and really managing and controlling the game is what makes this matchup so much more interesting because we've seen them both take over games, but now we're in this period where they're just trying to keep everything in control and just overlook everything and making sure everything is supposed to go as it should, which is a very big change of pace if I'm being honest. So that is the matchup. And in terms of who's going to win this game, I think it's just come to a point where we talk about the matchups, the keys to the game, the history, the stipulations around this matchup, but the biggest thing and simplest thing is that there just has to come a time where the Bills just got to stand up to the Chiefs and just say, you know what, like, this has gone on long enough. This losing to the same team, the same guy, the same coach, hearing the same thing over and over again just has to stop. And I think this is the Bills' year. I think not to win a Super Bowl, I'm not going to say that now, but I think this is their year to finally beat the Chiefs, right? You can't just keep having the Chiefs. You can't have Kansas City have too many things go wrong and still come back like they've done before. And I think this is an opportunity for them where if they get on top of Kansas City like they did in the first game, it's not like the Chiefs have this crazy explosiveness that they're able to change the game just like that. We talk about them being methodical and, very slow paced. So I think this is their opportunity to do something like that. And if the Bills are able to get on them and, have control of this game early on, I feel like the Chiefs are going to have a really tough time trying to come back in this game because they don't have a Tyreek Hill. They don't have a younger Travis Kelce to just make a play out of nothing. So everything is so slow paced and everything is so thought out and controlled that if the Bills, build up a lead for whatever reason, then the Chiefs have to still be slow, have to still be methodical to try and come back into this game, or else they're going to be doing something that they're not really accustomed to, at least this season. So I think that's going to play in the Bills' favor, and, I think it's just their time, right? Simply as that, they just gotta get over it. They gotta get over and go in there and defeat Patrick and the Chiefs, which is obviously an extremely hard thing to do. No one's done it, but I'm hopeful for some change this year, and that would lead me to my dream Super Bowl matchup in Buffalo and Washington. But before we start talking about Super Bowls or anything like that, that will conclude our show today. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. And if you want to see more of this specific show, please make sure to check out both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel, obviously on YouTube, where you can catch more coverage around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host, talking some more NFL, the draft coming up, off-season moves, head coaching moves, everything related to the NFL you can find on there. So thank you guys again for joining me on today's episode, and make sure to come back next week when we revisit and review everything from the conference championship games. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys again next week. Let's
go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to